for yourself, you're also doing for others. And what you're doing for others, you're doing for yourself.
Today's show topic is one near and dear to our hearts. We're going to be talking about relationships and how to use special hypnosis techniques to find happiness in your true soulmate. Nina has developed a proven process, a really tested process to discover your ideal self, to design your ideal life and clarify what your ideal mate would be. She has helped thousands of seeking couples find the love of their life, including her own. After 35 years in wrong relationships, she knows the unbelievable joy that comes with finally attracting and keeping a really great match.
Nina, welcome to the show. We're glad you're here with us today.
Hi, Nina.
Hi, thank you, Jim and Lynn. I'm so pleased to be here. Great. Well, the number one thing I find is to remember who you really are. And I remember the first time I heard that expression. I was in a very, very trying relationship. I was walking in the park listening to an audio presentation, and he was talking about how, he had come home and he was crabby with his wife. And he said, and then I realized I had just forgotten who I really was. And it shook me to my core. And I realized that in any moment when I'm unhappy, it's only because I've forgotten who I really am. The adjustments and the changes I've made through the hypnosis and the conscious dating has made all the difference. I spend most of my time now in that place where I remember who I really am, connected to my higher self, making better decisions, happier than ever before. And what I find is that the happier I am, the happier everyone is around me.
How do you go about making this work?
Well, I start with that concept of oneness. And oneness is, if you think about a river, David Bohm, the theoretical physicist, he talked about little eddies and whirlpools in a river. That's what our energy, our being is like. If you think about those little eddies and the whirlpools in a river, they're part of a great mighty stream, and they're still individual. Each one of them is individual in its own way, and that's like us. But when we remember that we're all one, and that life is teaching us what our preferences are, it makes it a lot easier to have the kind of forgiveness that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But having that ability to say, I am one, and that means I am every bit as valuable as everybody else, and I'm not better than anybody else. Okay. And that what I do to other people really comes back to either hurt or help me. So when I'm being kind and forgiving to others, I ultimately am being kind and forgiving to myself. When I'm judging myself and I'm being hard on myself, I'm actually being hard and judging on other people, because if you've ever been around someone that wasn't happy with themselves, they don't make you happy either, do they? But when you're around someone who genuinely likes themselves, now I'm not talking about somebody who's insecure and is pretending. I'm talking about that person that genuinely likes themselves. They're a joy to be around, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
They are. They're comfortable in their own skin.
So you see the happiness as being one with humanity. Do I understand that?
Yes, and that means not just that everybody's you and you're everybody, but that it's both connected, that you have to take care of yourself and the other. Because I think a lot of times when people think about oneness with humanity, they either have a sense of a loss, they think, well, then I'll lose myself.
Right.
Or they think that, well, that's going to hurt me because I'm going to have to give myself away. And it's like, no, it's quite the opposite, that what you do for yourself, you're also doing for others. And what you're doing for others, you're doing for yourself. So if you think about life teaching us our preferences, it's like a buffet. If you go to a buffet, you don't know if you like something or not until you taste it, right?
Right.
Uh-huh.
So you're out there experiencing life, and things happen that you like, and things happen that you don't like. Well, that's teaching us what our preferences are, so that we can choose for our preferences. Like, well, I like that, so I'm going to do that. Or I like me. If you've ever done something and you've liked yourself, it's like, ooh, I like me when I do that. I like me when I respond that way. And that's teaching you. Now, when you respond in a way you don't like, or if someone treats you in a way you don't like, that's letting you know what your preferences are. So rather than saying, well, I don't want anything ever bad, well, if you go to a buffet and you don't taste everything, how will you know what you like and what you don't like? You'll starve. If you don't go out and experience life and take every experience that you get as an opportunity to know what your preferences are, then you starve and you don't live fully. And that's where the happiness comes in, is letting go. I like to think of it like a lottery ticket. You can make every single lottery ticket you ever buy a winning ticket by writing your biggest grievance on it and just turning it in for peace, love, and joy. Turning it in for that oneness, finding the one, finding how that experience that's creating that grievance that you've got, how can that teach you what your preferences are for how you want to be, what you want to experience, and how you want to treat others. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think it does make a lot of sense. Is there room in your philosophical approach for a higher power?
Absolutely. It's from my higher self, which is connected to that higher, the bigger. What's bigger than me? So some people will call that God. Some people will call it the universe. It's my higher self that is connected and is part of that oneness, is part of that all.
Yeah, that gives a better picture of the wholeness. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and the judgment. I think it's really easy for us to go through. We create our reality, and our reality is perception. So as we're perceiving something, when we're judging it, we're creating our heaven or our hell right there in how we're judging it. Mm-hmm. So anytime you're unhappy, you can bet you're judging something. Now, you can be judging it as bad because you're not looking at it from the perspective of, well, this is teaching me a preference. This is a reflection. This is something I've put out there to experience. And I realize this is a high level of way of thinking, but when you put it out there that this is something I've put out there to experience, so I can experience this in my life and know what my preferences are. If I want to change it, I have to change what's in me. Mm-hmm. And the good news is that gives you total control. When you accept that everything is self-creation, you have absolute control. Because you know how you can't control anybody else, right? You can't control you can't control the economy. You can't control other people. You can't control what they do. You can only control yourself. I'm sure you've experienced that, yeah. So I like to think of this as sort of like the ultimate forgiveness, like ultimate meaning no one's actually done anything wrong. All I'm getting is a reflection back. So if I'm in a relationship and I'm experiencing something and I think I don't have a preference for this, I look inside and go, what am I doing to create this? How am I being that's reflecting this? Mm-hmm. Now, you may be in a situation where you need to leave the relationship. If you're getting beat up, and you're looking at this, it's like, okay, the only way I'm going to change this reflection, this person who's beating me up is a reflection, like a reflection in the mirror. The only way I'm going to change that is if I change me. Now, I've seen some amazing things happen, amazing changes happen in people's lives when they've changed when they've changed their own. When they're looking, for example, they're looking in the mirror. If you want to change the reflection, you have to change what you're doing. You have to change how you're looking. So when that person learned to, for example, like to smile at themselves, when they changed what was inside, it actually changed the behavior of the other person. Now, they couldn't directly affect that other person, but by changing themselves. I've seen this happen with parents where they were having difficulties with their children, and when the parent changed inside how they were judging right and wrong, when they stopped trying to give away their guilt when they stopped trying to giving away guilt is blaming, right? When they stopped blaming and they started taking responsibility for how they were showing up, their kids started changing their behaviors. It was a miracle. I see this in relationships all the time with a spouse. I've seen this with kids with their parents. Kids, 50-year-old kids dealing with their 80-year-old parents. When they changed, their parents' behavior changed. It's really quite miraculous.
That's really profound.
It is very profound.
In business, you hear people saying all the time, perception is everything. You were talking about perception, and what I'm hearing you say is to not be afraid to try things and experience life and put yourself out there, but to be careful, but to carefully analyze and notice what it is that you like, what truly makes you happy, but also reframe your perception. Like you said, you can't change what's going on around you and other people, but you can change your perception, and you can choose how to respond. And like you said, be in complete control.
That's right. And when we're creating our own reality, if we experience something as a violation of us, it's actually a self-punishment. And when I started looking at something that I'm experiencing as a violation of me, that it was actually a self-punishment, then I was able to look deep inside and say, well, what is it that I'm punishing myself for? And then I'd remember who I really am. And it comes all the way back around. It's like, this is who I really am, and I don't have to be that way anymore. And I don't have to create that. I don't have to punish myself. I can forgive myself because I didn't do anything wrong. I was out there experiencing. I don't like what I'm getting reflected back to me, so I'm going to change how I'm being. And I'm going to do what makes me feel good, that makes me feel good about who I am. And when I started acting in a way that made me feel good about who I was, I no longer needed that person to violate me because I was no longer needing that punishment. And life just kept getting better and better and more peaceful and more joyful. And I was attracting the most amazing new friendships into my life because when I was showing up in this way, I was attracting that into my life. You have to be a happy person in order to have a happy relationship. It takes two.
Nina, if I've had so many people talk to, both of us have, about finding that right person, their soulmate, how do you make it easier to start out? What's involved in your conscious dating approach?
Well, I like to start out with really having a deep discovery about who am I? Who am I before going into this relationship? What are my values? What are my beliefs? What are my ideals? And it kind of goes back to that, who do I know who I really am? Do I have a connection to my higher self? So I like to teach people how to access that higher self. If that's not something that they're easily able to do, I begin my training with that, along with the self-discovery questions about values, beliefs, and moving from who you really are into where am I going? So this is who I am. I'm going to back up just a second here. A lot of times when you were newly divorced, did you find that was one of the hardest things about going back into the dating scene was like you kind of lost yourself when you were in that relationship? We lose touch with what our preferences are. We might know that we want something other than what we got, but we lose sight of that. And that's why it's so important to start with who am I really? Because you don't want to take yourself as a confused, not being clear about what you want, and take that into the next relationship. I think that's why a lot of second relationships fail, because the person hasn't made any changes. They're still confused, and all they know is, well, I know I don't want that. Well, that's not very specific. You're still not looking for what it is you actually want. So that's why it's so important to know who you are and get back in touch with yourself. So then the second piece is, where am I going? What is your vision for life? What is your vision for your relationship? And how do they fit? How does your relationship fit in with your life? Because if you don't know where you're going and you choose your partner first, that can have devastating consequences. Because if you find out that where you're going is you're going into a field of work that you need their support in, and it might involve a move or something, and they're saying, no, I'm not leaving. My grandkids are here. My life is here. I would never move. Well, now you've got a real unsolvable problem because you didn't take into account what your vision for your life is and how your vision for your relationship and how they're going to fit in together. And that's why I like to work with relationship patterns. So we look at the past relationships with your parents that you were raised with siblings, with your best friends. And what we look at is not the characteristic of the person, but of the relationship. So what was it about your relationship with your mother that worked? And what was it about your relationship with your mother, and we do it with your father, that didn't work? And then we look at patterns after a person has looked, and we look at the relationships you've had with your mates and your partners throughout. And then we look at what are the patterns? What keeps coming up that's not resolved? And what are the things what are the things you want to keep? What is working? It's like, well, I definitely want this in a relationship. And you can find that it's like, oh, I definitely know I don't want this ever again. I don't want to repeat that. Now you're aware of it. The minute that pops up in a dating situation, you're going to know. You're going to know. Now you're conscious of it, you're aware of it, and you're watching out. Here's that situation again. I'm not going to get myself involved in that again.
People that are moving from one relationship to another, if they're anything like I was, I think if you're going through a divorce or you're leaving a really destructive relationship, you're so involved in healing. You're licking your wounds. I was so involved in just getting through one day to the next and healing from what just happened that all of the things that you just talked about were the furthest thing from my mind, and yet they were the most important. I think people really need help at that point, and that the programs that you offer are invaluable because people need to recognize that this is a path that they really probably shouldn't be walking alone because you're just devastated. You're not thinking.
And that's why I always start with a very in-depth relationship reading. I've got a short quiz on my website to just give a little information, but then I have a more in-depth relationship readiness quiz to see what areas are you not awake in? What areas are you not conscious in? What areas need to be repaired first? So that you have a very clear look at what are you missing before you start dating. So we get you in a place where you're ready. When you finally get out there and you're dating, you're ready because you've resolved these issues that were unresolved when you were going through and if there's some grieving processes, I have a wonderful process to help you to be able to keep those things that you loved about that person, to be able to embody them, because they're not gone. Those things that you appreciated in that person that you liked are not gone. They're still within you because you had to have it within you in order to appreciate it. Because remember, they're just a reflection of you. So it's very important to be able to reinforce that you're not losing those things that you liked. And the things that you didn't like, there's a process for letting go of those things, to let go of the things that didn't work for you. So you don't have to carry them around with you, and you don't have to have that reflection coming back. So it's a very nice process for letting go of the past relationships and being able to move forward.
Now that they're ready, what are the dating strategies that you give them for finding their ideal mate? Like we just said, both of us, getting back into the dating scene is a pretty painful process.
So the first thing is to know who should go with me. Like, who should this person be? So we work together to come up with the requirements. Now, those requirements are going to be based on all those things that the person worked on with who am I, where am I going, and what are my relationship patterns. So now, if you just ask somebody, what are your relationship requirements, they might come up with 3. But once you've done that in-depth work, you have a really good idea of exactly what those requirements are. And requirements are important because those are the deal breakers. Those are the things that create unsolvable problems in a relationship. Those are the things that people divorce over, because they, like if one person wants a child and the other doesn't, you can't have half a child. It's pretty hard to compromise on that. So requirements tend to be very black and white. They're very subjective. It's about the person who has the requirement is the only one who can tell you if it's satisfied or not. Then we also look at needs. Now, needs are a bit more flexible. There's functional needs such as, well, they need to be clean. I need somebody who picks up their socks. It's really critical to me. Now, maybe it's not a requirement, but it's something that if everything else were perfect, if all your requirements were met and they were a bit of a slob, it's like, okay, I'd still be with the person, but it's still a functional need. And the thing about needs that are different from requirements is there's different ways you can meet them. So if the person's messy and throws their socks on the floor, maybe they hire a cleaning service that comes in, or somebody comes in for half an hour a day and picks stuff up. But that's the idea, or you come up with some kind of an agreement. But needs can be met in different ways. And then, of course, there's emotional needs. Now, if you have an emotional need for, like I developed, based on the relationships I had a huge requirement for communication. Well, that really came from my parents. I needed to be heard. I needed to be able to say whatever it was I was feeling and just have it be heard. Didn't have to be accepted. Right. Had to be heard. And wow, what a difference when I finally knew that, and that was a requirement. Now, for some people, that might be an emotional need. That might be an emotional need. It might not be a requirement. For me, it was a requirement. It was a deal breaker. If everything else about them was perfect, but they didn't have that one emotional requirement, that was a requirement for me. It was a deal breaker. Now, for some people, that might just be an emotional need. It could be met in different ways. It's like, well, as long as I get this, and this, I'm okay. I can have my girlfriends will listen to me. A lot of people, that's what they have. Is they have friends, or they have a psychiatrist, or they have someone who listens to them. And then, of course, we talk about wants. And we look at personality strengths, we look at our own strengths and weaknesses and say, well, given my strengths and weaknesses, what should my partner have? So now that you have a perfect outline of who this person's going to be, now we need to go find them. And it's important to know who they need to be and have this list, because you need to do this before the hormones set in. Once you've met someone, if you jump into bed with them, now you've got hormones racing through your body, and they are going to skew your judgment so bad. Yeah. Now, chemistry is a wonderful thing, right?
I think so.
But you will find every way possible to rationalize if you haven't done this pre-work.
Exactly. So once you've decided who should go with you, and you're clear about that, so when you meet somebody, you're able to know right away if they're going to meet those requirements or not. The next step is to say, well, given who this person is, given the personality traits that I need them to have, given the requirements and the needs that I want fulfilled, it's like you have a profile of this ideal mate. And then the next question is, where would this person hang out? Where would I find this person? What's the most likely places that this person would go? And if you're not sure, ask other people. Let everybody you know who you're looking for. Let them know. Don't keep it a secret. Let your friends and your family and your neighbors say, you know what, I'm looking for this person, and give them a rundown of your requirements and your needs and what you'd like them to be like. And ask them, where do you think somebody like that would hang out? Where do you think I could meet someone like that? And the next thing you know, they're saying, well, I know somebody like that at work, and it never occurred to me that they might want to date somebody. Mm-hmm. So letting everybody know. And then the 4 absolute critical skills that every dating person needs to have are scouting, sorting, screening, and testing. Now, scouting, what that is going to this, finding and going to those places that this person would hang out in. So scouting is basically just being where you need to be. Now, scouting can also be when you go to your corner grocery store, when you buy gas, if you go to the coffee shop. Basically, anywhere you go, you can be scouting and sort of having your radar up, noticing if there's a single person there. Smiling, being approachable, obviously being safe. You always want to be safe, but being approachable. And then the next step is sorting. So when you're scouting and someone approaches you or you approach them and you're having a conversation, sorting is where you find out within a couple of minutes if this person is got a high probability of meeting your requirements or not. So I can meet somebody, talk to them in a very conversational way. I never grill somebody. It has to be conversational. Conversationally talking about if politics are really critical to you, you open it with just a conversation about, oh, say, did you see what so-and-so said? Fast way to get a response. Okay. If having children is a requirement for you, you might say, I was just in the park playing with my nieces. They were so fun. Do you have kids? I mean, it's a really easy way to do it. Mm-hmm. You just conversationally. Yeah. So now you're sorting. If this person, within a couple of minutes, you're going to know if this person if they respond and say, oh, no, I avoid children. Well, then they're not going to meet your requirement. They might meet the requirement of one of your friends, though, or they might be a good business contact. So you don't want to, just because they don't meet your requirements for a date, you want to be gracious. And if there's someone else you think you can connect with them, maybe find out something that what is their dream in their life, and maybe there's some way you can help them in another way. So you don't want to burn bridges. You want to be polite. But in that first couple minutes, whether it's a go or a no-go. The next step is screening. So if it's a go, you might say, well, I'd really like to have a conversation with you. So you could exchange emails. Maybe you just want to connect on an email. It's like, oh, really? You know about this drumming thing? I would like to go to a drumming event sometime. What's your email? I'll let you know the next time there is one. Or let's talk on the phone. Maybe have a conversation on the phone. You might want to jump right ahead to having coffee together. I always say avoid alcohol when you're first meeting somebody. Just because it makes you not care if they don't meet a requirement. Once you've had a drink, all of a sudden you don't care so much. It's kind of like that piece of bread that you weren't going to eat. Once you have a glass of wine, you don't care, you eat it. Same thing with dating. So now you're screening. Now when you're talking to them, you're probing further, but you're doing it in a conversational way. You give a little information about yourself, you see what you get back in return, and you're screening to see if they say that they're meeting your requirements. The next step is testing, and that's when you're actually dating. So you don't want to start dating somebody until you screen them to know that they're saying that they're meeting all your requirements and needs. Now you need to test to see if they're actually doing. One of the traps is the marketing trap. Well, if someone's in that marketing trap and they kind of figure out, ooh, she really wants kids, I'm going to act like I really like them, so she likes me. Well, you need to find out by testing. Okay, so they say they like kids, but do they really? So when you're dating, you have an opportunity to be around children. You see how they interact with them. If generosity is a requirement, you notice, how do they tip? Are they kind? Like if kindness is really important to you, are they polite to the waiter? So there's all kinds of things you can tell by how they act. So you don't want to get exclusive with anybody until you've really fully tested all of your requirements. I think online dating is terrific. I think that initially it's a really good place to get practice. It's a really good place to, to at least you have the opportunity to put your requirements out there. Now, people lie, but that's where the testing comes in. And it gives you an opportunity to find, if one of your requirements is that the person be athletic, it gives you an opportunity to match up with those people. Mm-hmm. So I think online dating can be very helpful, but ultimately, you're not going to know if you really have chemistry with the person until you meet them. So I recommend if there's somebody that there's a strong interest in, meet them as soon as you can. Just get in front of them as soon as you can. In a public place, do it safely. Don't divulge who you are, where you live. But if there's an interest, meet them in person. Because ultimately, it's people who meet in person that generally have the best chance. But I know people who found very, very wonderful partners that are perfect. They're perfect for each other, and they did it online. So I'm a big fan. I just like to caution people against only doing that.
Let's talk about how you incorporate hypnosis. And I know you do NLP, and that's neuro-linguistic programming for people who don't know. And people who do know probably understand a little bit, like it involves reframing and specific language patterns. But can you tell us what it specifically means to you in your practice and how it enhances the results for your clients?
All perception that you have. When we talked about reality earlier, all perception is NLP. You're using your visual, how you're hearing things, how you're feeling things, smelling and tasting. You're coding all your experiences in those senses, and you're using them to recreate memories. So when we were talking about knowing who you really are and knowing what your beliefs are, one of the things that gets in the way of finding your ideal mate are the beliefs that you have that are limiting you, the erroneous beliefs that were instilled in you as a child, even, and some of them as an adult. There aren't, all the good ones are taken. I hear that so many. All the good ones are taken. Well, having a belief like that is not helping. So that's when I use the hypnosis and the NLP is to help break up those limiting beliefs, break up those patterns, and help you to use it on purpose, because you're using NLP all the time anyway. You're using hypnosis. People walk around in trance states all the time, but now we're using hypnosis and NLP together on purpose to get you what you want instead of what you don't want. So I use the hypnosis and the life vision to help open up the possibilities. I use it in helping people to access their higher self and their imagination, using it for anchoring. Anchoring is a really big piece of NLP. It's like if you go somewhere and you smell something and all of a sudden you have this flood of memories coming back. That's an anchor. Sometimes we have an anchor, like when you go home at night, there's something that you see that lets you know you're home. And just when you go home tonight, or if you're at home, when you come back home, just notice, what is it that I see that triggers that sense of home, that feeling of home? It could be the garage door, it could be the end of the driveway, it could be the mailbox, it could be the window everyone has a different anchor. So we use this anchoring to help you to anchor to things that you want instead of things that you don't want. It's a way of keeping the change. We help keep the change. So you might have an experience of oneness. There might be something that you're experiencing, like wanting to get a feeling of peacefulness and love. Well, in order to maintain that feeling, you need to anchor it. So we use NLP to sort of to shore up and to secure the things that you want. And we let go of the anchors. We release the anchors through hypnosis and NLP to get rid of them. Mm-hmm. So, behaviors are usually, if you look at a behavior that you don't want, we don't want it because it's not giving us what we're doing it for. But when you dig down deep, using the hypnosis and the NLP, we dig down deep and say, well, why are you doing, like maybe you're smoking and you know that smoking isn't going to help you find a mate, and you really don't want to have a mate who smokes because then you're never going to be able to quit. So maybe part of your dating is to quit smoking. So underneath that behavior of smoking, maybe it's like, well, I have a need to rebel. Well, what's underneath it? What's more important than rebelling? Well, it's being who I really am. And what's underneath that? What's even more important than that? It's like, well, that feeling of connection or peace. And when you get to that point where that's what's really behind it, then you can just be there instead. It's like, well, if you could just have that feeling of peace.
It's been fantastic having you on this show.
It has been. You have got so much to offer.
Thank you.
Thank you.